How many days away? It's here. It's coming. It's right upon us. Next week, Friday evening, we will all be enjoying our Seders. Wherever we will be enjoying our Pesach, we're very excited about it. And with that in mind, the purpose of our shir here is that each of us can have a greater appreciation for the importance, the significance of the overall event of our Seders. And hopefully we could go through some of the how-tos or any questions you might have specifically related to any parts of the Seder, maybe a little background, and anything else that you have in mind that you want to discuss. So we didn't really get too deep into this yesterday, but I thought if we start off with the concept, the idea that Torah is not just his story, but it's our story, and therefore, as we go through the experience, we should understand that those same energies that existed 3,334 years ago when our ancestors were liberated from their slavery in Egypt are present here today. And perhaps, I don't know if I told you guys this story this year, but one of my favorite stories that I always like to retell before Pesach most years is the story about this Yid Shmerel, the drunkard. Did I tell you the story about it? No. Oh, it's a good story, my friends. I can't not tell you the story about Shmerel. You see, Shmerel, he grew up in Bardichev. It's a town somewhere in Ukraine and Russia. And Shmerel was a shikr. You know what's a shikr? A drunkard. The other day I read my kids a story about Zalman the shikr, or Itcha the shikr. There's a couple of shikrs. And what's a town? What's a shul without its shikr, right? And the truth is, look, I don't want to digress and tell you too many other stories, but I'll quickly tell you the story about Itcha the shikr. You see, there was a wedding that happened in Israel, in Jerusalem in 1954. And there was two prominent families, except one problem was the father of the chassan. Although he was a very learned and distinguished person, he couldn't walk. His legs were immobile. He suffered a dreadful disease, and his feet were just not able to carry him. Instead, he had to be wheeled in to his son's wedding, and it was a pity to behold. And at the wedding, this man told the story of how he lost his mobility. It's a fascinating story. He says he grew up in Europe, and he was attending a particular yeshiva. And there in the yeshiva, they were all studious, and they would spend all their time studying, learning Torah day and night. And in the yeshiva, there was one man, an elderly person, Itcha the shikr. Itcha minded his own business, but all he would do was drink a lot of vodka. He had a bottle, and he would drink, and he would sit on the bench, and he would fall asleep. They didn't bother him, he didn't bother them. All was good and fine until one day, a man walked into the study hall to the Beis Medrash and said, "Young men, I need some help." This man was a merchant, and he had his wagon outside being schlepped by a horse. You know, this is a century ago. It was still going horse and buggy. And his horse and buggy got stuck in the mud, and he needed some help. He's asking the yeshiva students to help him schlep his wagon and horse out of the mud so he could continue to his destination and sell his wares and do what he has to support his family and take care of his kids. Well, the yeshiva bachram looked at him and said, "Sorry, sir, you could find hired help somewhere else. We are yeshiva bachram. We are here to study." In fact, it reminds me of another story and a story and a story. When the Baal Shem Tov once saw the students didn't want to go help a guy, there was a Russian peasant asking for some help, and the students refused. Let me just quickly, just a second, take a break. So the students, they said to this Russian peasant who thank you so much, Vusi, who they didn't want to help, they said, "Sorry, we're not able to." So the man responded to them in Ukrainian back then. He said, "Możesz, da nie chcesz." You can, you just don't want to. Okay, remember that lesson in life. Oftentimes, when people say, I can't, it's impossible. Well, impossible spells I'm possible. Remember that. Okay, so anyways, the students said to this man, to the merchant, we're very sorry we can't help you. You could get help from someone else. He says, please, I didn't want to disturb Yeshiva Bachram from their learning, but I couldn't find anyone else. I need your help. If you don't help me, my horse is going to die, and if my horse dies, I can't schlep my wares, and if I can't schlep my wares, I can't sell them, and if I can't sell them, I can't afford to put bread on my table, and he gives them the whole story. And the students say, well, it's not our problem. Itcha the Shikar overhears this. He says, guys, you go help this man now. Like, you're a drunkard. Go back into your stupor. Don't bother us. Don't tell us what to do. We are the wise, sagacious students. We're sitting and learning in yeshiva all day. Don't tell us we have to go help this guy out. Itcha the Shikar takes another swig of his vodka and says, you guys, if you don't go help this man, I'm telling you there's going to be consequences. Oh yeah, you're threatening us? He says, if you don't move it now to help him, then later on your feet won't be able to take you elsewhere. Yeah, old drunkard, don't tell us what to do. Okay, the man goes out and he looks for other help. He comes back, he says, guys, I'm telling you, my horse is struggling there, it's in the mud. It's about to die. If you don't come help me, I'm going to lose all this parnasa. Well, now that there's telling them that this situation is dire, the yeshiva students now decided, okay, they'll go help. So they get up from their books, from their tables, they close their sfarim, and they're off to go help this man with his horse and buggy. But by the time they get down the road to where the horse was stuck, it was dead. They were disappointed. The man was disappointed. What could they do? They're just yeshiva students. They come back to the study hall, and when Itcha heard what happened, he said, young men, I want you to come to my house tonight. Because tonight at midnight, I will die. And I want you guys to be present to help me with my burial and with all my needs. Well, the guys look at him. Should they believe him? Should they not? Mysterious drunkard? Well, anyways, they decided they'll come. 10 o'clock, they show up to his house. It's a little, he gave them the address. They come to the house, a little shack on the other side of the town. And they come inside, you have to believe this old drunkard or not, that he's going to die, who knows. He says to them, listen, in 2 hours' time, I will no longer be amongst the living. I want you to go to the Chevra Kadisha and to tell them that I want to be buried next to our town's illustrious rabbi. They said, the town's illustrious rabbi, this venerable sage, he was a very holy person. You're a drunken shikar. Why would we bury you next to this rabbi? You don't even pray. You don't even study. He says, you know, by the way, digression again, in our parsha this week, we learn about the laws of Lashon Hara, not to speak derogatorily about others, nor about ourselves. And generally speaking, when you point one finger at someone else, you get 3 fingers pointing back at you. So just remind me where I'm holding in the story, because I want to quickly tell you another story. A lady related that she was boarding a flight. And you know, the flight was a little bit delayed, and she's in the airport. So she goes to the vending machine, she puts in a couple of rands, dollars, and she buys a bag of pretzels. She buys the bag of pretzels, and she puts it in her bag, and she comes to sit in the waiting area in the lounge just before they announce departure boarding. Well, there's a lady sitting next to her, and this lady keeps sticking her fingers into the pretzels bag. Now you imagine how she's feeling. What chutzpah you have. It's COVID. You're sticking your hands into my bag of pretzels. And each time the lady would put her hand in the bag of pretzels and take out some pretzels, she would move over her bag a little bit, like, you know, she didn't want to be rude and say, how dare you stick your hand in my bag of pretzels, but she would move it over each time, like a little bit, and, you know, close the bag so that this other woman stops sticking her hand in the pretzels bag. Well, eventually they get onto the plane, and she's getting ready to board the flight, you know, for the flight to take off. She's taking her stuff apart. She opens her bag, and lo and behold, what does she discover inside her little personal bag is her bag of pretzels. Now she realizes, I was pointing my finger at that lady, accusing her of allegedly stealing my pretzels, when it turns out I was the one stealing her pretzels. So you know how it goes when we stick one finger against someone else, we get 3 pointing back at ourselves oftentimes. Anyways, the students say back to this Itcha the Shikr, they said, Itcha, where do you pray? We never see you davening. We just see you sitting there in the shul with the bottle. I remember when I was a kid, maybe Rabbi Haller remembers him too, Zalman the Shikr in 770. Gedenkst? Now I can feel like an old man. No, we're both young, right? Zalman the Shikr. This was Itcha the Shikr. And Itcha says, don't accuse me of not praying. You could look at that box over there, you'll see my tefillin, which I wear every day. They open the box and they see the most mahudar, beautiful tefillin. Wow. Who was to know that Itcha the Shikr actually prays? They said, but you never study, you never learn. How could you be buried next to our venerable great sage, the Rav of our community? He says, listen, I'm just requesting that I be buried next to him. But to answer your question about me learning every day, you could open my file cabinet and there you'll see all the notes from everything I study. They opened the file cabinet and they couldn't believe the Chidushei Torah, the novel, brilliant ideas, his commentary on all the Torah that he studied. They couldn't believe how they had this perception of Itcha the Shikr as a simple drunkard, and they didn't realize how he studied every day and prayed every day. Now that they heard his request to be buried next to the Rav, they said, okay, we'll make sure to bring your request to the Chevra Kadisha. And lo and behold, within 2 hours, he was dead. Passed away. They sat there until he passed. They said Tehillim. They covered his body, they lit a candle. They did everything that one needs to do when one passes on. And they dispatched 2 of the students. They said, you go quickly to the Chevra Kadisha so we could arrange for his immediate burial. They come to the Chevra Kadisha officers, and the Chevra Kadisha at first said, Itcha the Shikr, we're going to bury him next to the Rav. And when they told him about what they discovered is tefillin and his writings, even the Chevra Kadisha were convinced. They said there's one problem. According to our documents, I doubt they had it computerized back then. This is nearly a century ago. That cemetery is full. It's like West Park today. It's impossible in certain sections to find a plot. You got to go all the way to the new section. We could put him in the new section. We'll find a nice place. They said, nobody's requesting to be buried next to the rabbi. They said, but that area is overcrowded. There's not a single plot remaining. Look at our papers. So this is his request. So the yeshiva students said, we'll go look. They go and they see, indeed, the place is packed. There's graves, one on top of the other. There's not a single space. They climb through and they get to the rabbi's burial plot. And guess what? Right next to the rabbi, there's one spot. They knew this was for Itcha the Shikr. And there they buried him. Anyways, now years passed. And here's this man, the father of the chassan, at his son's wedding, saying, I know why it is, why my mobility problem, why I can't walk, and why I'm being carried into this wedding. And I just want to tell you, what is the words of our sages that don't, Rabbi Hali, you'll have to quick help me out here, the word divrei hediot, they shouldn't be kal beinecha. Birchas hediot. That don't underestimate the blessing of anyone. And he says in this case, the curse. If you have the power to bless, this man sort of cursed us. He said that we won't be able to walk. I don't know about my colleagues. The war came and many of them got lost in Europe. He doesn't know what happened to his friends. But he says he's not able to walk, even though he survived, made it to Israel before the war, but he lost his mobility due to Itcha the Shikr's curse. And he doesn't, and this is what it is. And he was telling everyone, be careful with your words, what you tell others, and don't underestimate the words of anyone else. Well, my friends, the story is not over. There was a man at that wedding, and I don't remember his name, a Lubavitcher Chassid. Khan. And he heard the story, and he decided to transcribe it, to write it in a letter to the Rebbe, and asked the Rebbe for a bracha for this man, for the father of the Chassid. And the Rebbe said, I don't know the exact, I'm just paraphrasing some of his response, but basically the Rebbe said that it can't be that this curse would be permanent, and therefore he should do something to remedy it. And the Rebbe suggested he should study Chitas, the daily portion of Chumash, Tanya, and Tehillim and Tanya, and his mobility would be restored. Miraculously, he went to the doctors, and indeed they found him a cure, and he was able to start walking once again. And this man then became a great endorser and promoter of chitas, that people should say the Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya, or learn Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya every day. Now, this story was all an introduction. We're still not into our Pesach prep. It was an introduction to a story that I was going to tell you as an introduction. Yeah. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Kol Torah. Wow. What? Listen, I read the story a very long time ago, so I don't remember the details. So I was just telling you guys a story that, what I remember from the story. Who has it in his book? Oh, yeah? Pesach without the postscript of the Rebbe. So what does he say is the cure? Miraculous. Interesting. Very interesting. Look, I've heard many stories from Rabbi Pesach Krohn, and maybe one day he'll publish the postscript. What's that? Yeah. Well, I will tell you the other story since we were talking about drunkards. It was in the town of Berditchev. Right? I was telling you about Shmerel the drunkard. I don't know where to start the story. I will go to the end and go back to the beginning. It was well past midnight on the first night of Pesach, and if you recall yesterday we talked about the importance of concluding your Seder, at least the first Seder, by midnight. And here's the great Hasidic master, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. He just concluded enacting his Seder in Berditchev in the precise ideas of the way the Kabbalah teaches, with many meditations and thoughts. And there were all of his students participating, all his disciples. And this wasn't a simple matter. If you're with Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, he would read his Haggadah, recounting the story of the Exodus of Egypt and discussing the deeper meanings that were implicit in all of its passages, the messages that were relevant. They weren't just drinking 4 cups of wine. To them, each cup was an enactment of that experience. They didn't just dip the karpas into salt water and the maror into charosas. They didn't just eat matzah, right? To them, every single aspect of the Seder, from the korach sandwich to the afikoman dessert, to the songs that they sang in between, the praises of gratitude to Hashem, all were in accordance not only with the Shulchan Aruch, with the letter of the law, but also with all the deep esoteric principles found in the awesome mystical works of Kabbalah, as taught by the saintly Arizal. Now, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, he and his disciples, they conducted many Seders. And to them, the Seders were always important, but each year would get better and better, and this one by far surpassed all their previous Seders. And the Rebbe and all those present felt transported into a different world, as though they had risen above their bodily limitations and into a world of pure divinity. Sort of like almost every event I attend at my shul, where all the ladies go, so divine, right? So divine. Anyways, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, who was privy to information from the higher world, he gets this message. Levi Yitzchak's Seder was pleasing to God, but there's another Jew in Berditchev called Shmerel the Shikr. His Seder reached even higher than Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's. Now, who knew about Shmerel the Shikr? How could his Seder have been better than Rabbi Levi Yitzchak with all its Kabbalistic, deep, mystical meditations and kavanas? Well, they decided they have to go check with Shmerel, because Shmerel was not exactly known as a tzaddik. In fact, he was pretty far from him. If he was Shmerel the Shikr, they knew that, he was more addicted to his bottle than to Torah and Tefillah. Well, Reb Levi Yitzchak was thinking to himself, this guy must be one of the hidden tzaddikim, like Itcha the drunkard. There must be something to him. And he lives right here in our town in Barditchev. So even though it was 2 o'clock in the morning and everyone by then really wanted to retire for the night, they decided to go visit Shmerel the Shikker and see what it was about his Seder that was so special. As they came to his home, they knock on the door. Good Yom Tov, with, joy. And the lady of the house opens up. She says, how can I help you? It's at 2 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing here? Well, the Hasidim said, please excuse us for this late hour, but is your husband Shmerel available? Well, she says, you want Shmerel? Give a cook. He's right there, under the table where he is drunk. Okay? Oy, what's going on here? In the meantime, they hear her going and she's filling up water in a bucket. And before you know it, she's throwing the water on her sleeping husband under the table. He then, where am I? Well, they get him up, and she says, the Rebbe is here to see you, Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, with all his Hasidim. Finally, they'll put you in your place for what you did to us. Did to us? What did you do? What's going on? Poor Shmerel there, he's staggered, sopping wet, and he's making his way to the rabbi after hearing his wife give him a mapala. And when he saw that it really was Reb Levi Yitzchak standing there with all his Hasidim around, he fell at their feet, begging, pleading, weeping. He said, please, Rebbe, don't punish me. It's not my fault. I didn't know better. Please, have mercy on me. I promise I'll never do it again. And you can imagine, as puzzled and confused as Shmerel is, Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev is even more so. Because this Shmerel, ostensibly, at least what Reb Levi Yitzchak is hearing from on high, had the most important, significant, impressive Seder in the heavenly realms. So Reb Levi Yitzchak, he is completely astounded at this bizarre scene. And he's thinking, this guy, Shmerel the drunkard, with all his apologies, he really had such a lofty Seder that, what's going on here? And of course, he bent down, lifted poor Shmerel to his feet and said, listen, Shmerel, I didn't come to punish you. In fact, I don't even know what you're talking about, but please let me in. Let's sit down. Let's talk. I only want to ask you one thing. Go, you can put on a dry shirt. We'll wait for you. Let's talk. Some minutes later, they sat there facing each other over Shmerel's small table, and Reb Levi Yitzchak looked at him very kindly and said, Shmerel, listen, I want to tell you how you conducted your Seder last night. Just tell me about it. And don't worry, I promise I'm not going to punish you, I promise you. And there goes Shmerel moaning. And he said, my Seder, Rebbe, I really didn't know better. Oy vey, I'm so sorry. Anyways, gradually he calmed down and began speaking. He said, early this morning, Erev Pesach, he was talking to his children, his kinderlach, and his children tell him what they learned in Cheder. You have to understand, their father, Shmerel, poor guy, he grew up as an orphan, lost his parents at a young age. He was raised by relatives, Toda Rabah. And sadly, when there's not the same love and care that a parent has for the child, it's sometimes not as genuine, it's not as sincere, and doesn't come through. And Shmerel, because he didn't have the love of loving parents, he needed some way to escape his sorrow, his troubles. One of the easy ways of doing that, as you all know, is a nice drink. You take a dope, and with that, the uncle could scream, could shout, could yell, and he succumbed to this habit, his addiction of alcohol, while his uncle mistreated him. And so Shmerel knew every day you drink a nice bottle and you drown out all your sorrows. Thank God there was a beautiful woman who was willing to marry him despite his habits. She also was an orphan. And with time, they had children. And although he didn't have the best education considering his circumstances, he and his wife managed to put together enough bissel geld. She worked, and they sent the kids to Cheder. The kids came home from Cheder that day, Erev Pesach, and they said, Tati, don't you know that vodka that you drink is made out of grains? And therefore it's chometz, it's leaven, and it's forbidden to consume on Pesach. So here I am, Erev Pesach, walking the streets, and I need something to drink because that's how I get about life. And I see all the people in the town. This one has a broom over his shoulder. This one's carrying a box. The other one is something else. Everyone's scurrying about. Everyone's getting ready for Yom Tov. And me, I need a solution to my problem. What's my problem? Tonight is Pesach. And I don't have what to drink, right? And he's thinking, what am I going to do? Well, I thought to myself, how many days is this holiday? 8 days. So if I usually get by with a bottle a day, I'll do 8 bottles today. And like this, I'll have enough vodka for the next 8 days, and I won't have to worry about the holiday without vodka. Well, that's what Shmerel did. He drank down 8 bottles of vodka, and the next thing he remembers, he's sleeping soundly in his bed, and suddenly his wife comes, a spritz. Wake up, Shmerel! I need your help. We gotta get the table set for Yom Tov. It's time to clean the house. We gotta get ready. Yeah. I'll get there soon. In the meantime, the kids are helping out. The poor kids have to peel the maror, the horseradish. You know what that's like? That was my job as a kid. I think it was my punishment for my misbehavior. My parents would give me to peel the horseradish. Ay. The kids are doing it, ausgewöhnt, like you said. And there he is, Shmerel, lying in bed. His wife, of course, knew how to give him a few nudges. Shmerel, you bum, you drunkard, you shicker, you good for nothing. She tries waking him up from time to time. In the meantime, the kids are getting the house cleaned and prepared and cooking and cleaning. And before you know it, you see everybody's getting ready to light their Yom Tov candles. And Shmerel, he's still there lying in bed, drunk. And every once in a while, his wife comes to remind him and spritz a little more water on him to wake him up. And he pushes the snooze button. And there she goes, come on, Shmerel. Everybody's lighting their Yom Tov candles. The kids need you to take them to shul. 5 minutes. Before you know it, people are already coming home from shul. And his wife says, come on, Shmerel. All the Jews, the whole world over, are getting ready to make their Seder. And you are lying there like a drunken ox. Wake up. Time to make the Seder. Before you know it, you hear Kiddush coming from all the rooms, the homes nearby. And the poor Shmerel Kindlach are waiting for their daddy to wake up from his drunken stupor. And he's still lying there drunk. An hour goes by, another hour. Wake up, you Shmerel, you lazy good for nothing. And now it's almost midnight. And now she brings out, what do you call it when you're bringing out all the guns blazing? She pours buckets of water on him. Every curse she could imagine, she gives it to him. Get out of bed, it's almost chatzos. We already heard Dayenu and the Manishtana and all the songs. And the only family in town not to have a Seder yet, Shmerel is ours. Shame on you! And she probably gets the kids screaming at him. Anyways, Shmerel says to Rav Levi Yitzchak, now I knew this is serious. I staggered to my feet. I put on some dry clothes, and I gathered with my kids around a beautifully bedecked set table. The candles were shining brightly. Still, they were going on the very bottom. Okay? All the glassware, the cutlery, everything was sparkling so nicely. My poor wife and kids, you could see how they put in all the effort to prepare, to clean, to get ready. Everything was so different, so holy. And me, a lowlife, a shikker, sitting here. The Haggadah in front of me, the wine, the matzah, everything ready. My wife looking so resplendent and beautiful, the kinderlach. She's the queen, they're princes, smiling. And here I am, a shikker. And I didn't know what to do. The vodka was still swirling in my head. But to be honest, Rebbe, even sober, I don't even know how to make a seder, let alone shikker. So I took a large bowl and I put everything into it. Some matzah, some wine, some maror, some charoses, what else? I threw it all into the plate. It's almost chatzos, right? At 5 minutes to midnight. And I said to myself as follows, Eibishter. I picked up my bowl and I started talking to God. So just like I'm talking to you now, I started talking to God. I said, God, listen, I don't know you, but you do know me. You know that after my father got killed, I had to work all the time. I was raised by people who didn't love me so much. I never had a chance to learn Torah properly. You know why I succumbed to this addiction, right? Heavenly Father, I don't know how to read this book, this Haggadah. In fact, I can't even read anything. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this stuff here. But one thing I do know. I know that a very long time ago, you sent a great prophet, Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, to take my great-grandparents, my ancestors out of Egypt. And I'm sure that one day you will send the Mashiach who will take all of us out of our troubles. But dear Heavenly Father, at this moment, I so desperately need your help. Please, just like you liberated them from their slavery and bondage, please free me now from my slavery to this addiction, to this habit of drinking. Look what it did to our family tonight, how it ruined our family Seder. Please, I beg of you, Father in heaven. And with that, I gulped down this bowl of matzah, wine, maror, charoses, all the things together. And then I fell back asleep. So, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev then understood how, for this man, the Seder wasn't just an event. It wasn't just a dinner. It meant something real to him. And I think about the words. The man says, God Almighty, I don't know you. I never studied enough to know you. But I know that you do know me. Sometimes the simplest people unwittingly are saying the most profound, beautiful ideas. And maybe you could say that the profoundest ideas are actually the simplest ones. I don't know you, but you know me. Very beautiful and powerful. It's true that no one really knows him. Even the greatest of the great, even the ministering angels on high, don't comprehend Hashem's essence, which of course transcends both finitude as well as infinity. We only know that which he revealed to us in his holy Torah. But we are absolutely confident that he knows us, that he loves us, that he cares for us, and that there's a mission with which he entrusted us, that we are indispensable to God's plan. Like the fellow has said, I know I'm worth something because God don't make no junk. Each of us mean the world to him. And that's why in Jewish law we say, one who saves one life saves an entire world. Every human being is an entire universe. But of course, we have to try to know him. We have to do our part. And there's an exact and a right way to the Seder, as is the case with all mitzvahs. But God also understands our limitations and always wants and expects of us to do the best that we can under our circumstances. This man had his conditions, his challenges. If, due to whatever reason, for limited knowledge, we can only do so much, that's okay. Do what you can. This is what God wants from us right now. And it's incumbent upon us to attempt to increase our knowledge. That's why you come here. That's why you're joining us virtually if you're not here with us in person. That's why I encourage each of you, thank God our crowd is growing, to bring a friend along. Bring more friends along. Unless I'm that bad that you don't want to hear. Then bring them at least for the lunch afterwards. But it's a deal. It's a package deal. Lunch only comes with a shiur. You can't just come for lunch. No such thing as a free lunch. Well, maybe there is here. But there's strings attached. You got to come for the shiur before. So what do we say? You know, a person could be, maybe some people are reluctant to daven, to conduct a Seder, whatever else, because I fear doing it wrong. So what I want to say to you now, as we're going to look into conducting our Seders and how to prepare for the Seder, is don't worry about doing it wrong, because you're here to learn how to do it right. Yeah. We have to do what we can and do it to the best of our ability. Give it all you can, and that's certainly pleasing to God, as this story of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. And by the way, my teacher, Rabbi Jacobson, tells the story. He related this story that he was in Kobe, Japan one year for Pesach. And he told this story, and there was a lady who burst into tears. And she came over to him afterwards and said, she is a descendant of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, and for whatever reason, she went off the Torah path. She lost her way with Yiddishkeit. And she was in Japan, but of course, on Pesach night, one seeks out a Seder. Now, though she was from Borough Park in New York and out traveling the Far East, she went to the Seder in Kobe. And she was expecting just to have a quick meal, a dinner, have somewhat of a Seder and go home, or go on to her lodgings and continue her trip. But she said, Rabbi Jacobson, you struck a chord in my heart by telling me a story about my great-grandfather. This story. So never give up. It's never too late. In fact, one of the great lines that we say in the Haggadah, and we'll go through some of those lines, and maybe if you guys want, because I planned a lot for today's shiur, and considering I didn't even start today's shiur yet, do you realize that everything I told you so far was not in my plan? Seriously, I might do something with tomorrow. If you guys want, we could do maybe a shiur tomorrow as well. For those who want to come, it's not the usual, but maybe we'll do it tomorrow just because I see the clock is ticking and there's a lot to learn about the Seder. So, please God. Where was I supposed to go? Okay, let's start with this little exercise because like I said, we want the Pesach Seder experience not just to be mechanical, not just to go through the motions, not just to do what's traditional. That's what I was going to say, is that in the Seder, one of the lines we talk about, most nations like to talk about their glorious past, all their wonderful people, their Mandelas, their Abraham Lincolns. We Jews, we start a Seder off, Mitchila, we say, you know something? Our great-grandparents, they were idol worshippers. What are you doing this year? Don't you want to talk about how wonderful our great-grandparents were? Even Avraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu, the great patriarchs and matriarchs of the Jewish people, they were idol worshippers. You know that? Hold on. How could an idol worshipper be the great-grandparents, the patriarch and matriarch of the Jewish nation? Because that's the beauty about them. Even though they were steeped in idol worship, they were able to change. And what does that say about us? As we are coming to the Seder, don't tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. No. This is my privilege and opportunity to be at a Seder and to do it to the best of my ability. And that's why we're here to discuss and to learn and to cover some of those ideas and aspects that will make the Seder most meaningful. And that's the point, is that we want that experience to penetrate our own lives today. That it shouldn't just be his story, Moses' story, the story of our ancestors leaving Egypt. It should be our story, this Pesach. The Seder is essentially about experiencing freedom. And so we recount the ancient story of our ancestors' liberation. But it should be very personal and relevant to each of us. So how are we going to do that? I want you to take a moment and ask yourself this question. What are the stifling elements in your life that seem to hold you hostage? Perhaps it's a certain person, maybe a traumatic experience, maybe a toxic relationship, maybe there's other setbacks, financial hardships. And in order to have a meaningful Pesach Seder this year, if you have a pen and paper or a phone or whatever, or at least mentally, think of 3 areas, 3 major antagonists in your life that you would like to be liberated from. And when you experience Pesach this year, just like Shmerel the Shikar, don't let it just be a story of our ancestors. Shmerel asked God to help emancipate himself from his misery. Ask the Eibishter to help liberate you from whatever difficulty. Of course, you have to do your part as well. Now, you could think back to our national story of the Exodus. Who was the liberator? God, of course, right? So at the Seder, as you recline like royalty and recount the stories of deliverance, I want you to be encouraged by the fact, just like Shmerel was, that just as God delivered the Jewish people so many years ago, so will Hashem deliver you from these 3 ideas, from those aspects of your life that you need liberation from. And perhaps you want to take a moment now and describe what redemption might look like for you. Close your eyes. Imagine it just like that. Feel it. Breathe it in. God is ready to give it to you. You will experience this, please God, starting now. When Pesach comes, you will feel liberated from all those struggles, challenges, obstacles, limitations that you might have and that I might have, because who doesn't have? King Solomon says, "Ein tzaddik asher ya'aseh tov v'lo There's not even a single righteous person in this world, a tzaddik or tzaddikis, who does only good and never sins." We all have our faults, our shortcomings, our setbacks. But if we learn the story, not just as his story, but as our story, then we could apply its lessons for life. And so part of what I thought we'll do as we go through the Seder is maybe to apply some of those ideas, some of those lessons, so that your Seder, yes, you look at the historical element, and then you will have perhaps noting the slave mentality and then the freedom mentality. A slave looks at things, oi. A free person sees everything as joy. So with that, my friends, we're getting ready and excited. How do we say it? So much preparation, much anticipation. Passover is here, it's time for celebration. Now, since Pesach is the highlight of the year, and as we discussed yesterday, many of our fondest memories revolve around the Seder. Could you think of so many? I want to hear, if anyone wants to share, a funny Seder memory. I have one right now that comes to my mind when I was maybe 12 years old. And in fact, when I think about that, yesterday we celebrated my daughter's bat mitzvah. I think we have 4 birthdays now in my family on yesterday's date because I have a new great nephew who was born yesterday. My nephew and niece, one of my nephews and nieces in New York, had a baby yesterday on the same day as my brother and sister in Florida had a baby. And so I have a nephew in Florida born yesterday, my daughter, and a new great nephew. I don't know who else. So Baruch Hashem, we like sharing a lot of birthdays in my family. When I think of each of my kids are born on someone else in the family's birthday. My eldest son is born on my brother's birthday. My daughter, like I said now, she's got already a few companions on her birthday. My 3rd child was born on my birthday. And I'm sure the others also have quite a few shared birthdays, Ken and her. Oh, beautiful. Wow, and that's also my father's birthday, Yud Aleph Nisan, the birthday of the Rebbe and my father. So it's my biological father of blessed memory who was born on Yud Aleph Nisan. And the Rebbe, who was like my spiritual father, also born on this day, Yud Aleph Nisan. And in fact, this coming Tuesday, Monday night Tuesday, will mark 120 years since the birth of the Rebbe. And I encourage you all to join us Monday night. We'll have Natan Sharansky, as well as Rabbi Brisky from California speaking for us on Zoom. On Tuesday evening, we will have a dinner for Brengen at Torah Academy, and everybody's welcome to come there for the special event with a delectable feast to celebrate 120 years, special gift to humanity, the birth of the Rebbe. So my friends, we think of all these memories. I was going to tell you one of my own. I remember my grandmother sitting next to me, and I remember, the family sitting around. This must have been 1993 or 4. Like I said, I was about 12 years old. And my brother-in-law is leaning over me. He and my grandmother would smoke away the whole Seder. They were smoking the cigarettes. Okay, back in the 90s, it wasn't so bad, right? In fact, I smoked a couple of cigarettes. I used to bum off my grandmother pell-mell. I learned at a young age that it's, all that tobacco, the unfiltered, would just, it would get wet and dissolve in my mouth. Phew. Thank God I never got addicted to that. My father, who started smoking at a very young age, I think he told me at 6 years old, because growing up in Russia during the war, they didn't have very much food. You know what the famine was like in the 1930s and 40s there. So cigarettes kept their hunger at bay. So my brother-in-law got a big beard. Back then it was black. I think today it's, I haven't seen him in a very long time, in a few years. So I spoke with him last night to wish Mazel Tov, but I would imagine it might be whiter now. At least that's a couple of white strands. Anyways, he leans over me to the Leichter, the beautiful silver candelabra that my mother of blessed memory would light at the beginning of each Shabbos and Yom Tov with all the candles to celebrate the holiday. And my brother-in-law leans over, and of course, along with lighting up his cigarette, his beard somehow dissolves into my soup. Ladies and gents, just a moment, and we're going to just take Sorry about that. Welcome back, Cynthia. Belated happy birthday. So good to have you with us. You know what, guys? I want you all to join me to sing a song, a happy birthday, to Cynthia, who's joined us now. She just walked into the shir. The good thing is, if you come late to the shir here, then we question you with lunch. But if you come into the Zoom, you can come anytime. All right, all together, let's sing happy birthday to Cynthia. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Cynthia. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Cynthia. Good to see you. Good to have you back. Good to have you in the shir. Okay, so that was my little funny memory, having the beard dissolve in my soup. His beard got trimmed over Yom Tov. It looked quite funny. And somehow we lit his beard afire instead of his cigarette. Anyways, that was just, if anyone want to share, it didn't smell very pleasant, by the way. I don't know if you ever smelled burnt beard. Nothing smelled good. How do you know? I remember it for how many years already? This is 30 years ago. This is it's about 30 years ago. Anyways, Yeah. Okay, with that in mind. So that's, of course, hopefully there's fun times. Sometimes it could get a little bit challenging. For my kids... Pardon?
Okay.
What? Fantastic. Someone have a question? No? Otherwise, I'll mute you all. For my own children, I have to say, we grew up having Pesach at home. It's a whole different experience. They go to a retreat. What could I say? They have it a little bit different than I did, but they have a different experience, and hopefully they'll have a meaning and purpose in that as well. My dear wife, God bless her, she insists that we're having a family Seder. For all the years when we were on our retreat, we always did the communal Seder. This year, we appointed somebody else to do the first night communal Seder. We will have, for the very first time, our own family Seder at the retreat. Now, the truth is, in previous years, we're doing this retreat now for 9 or 10 years. But, so my kids are too young to remember, but before that, I would conduct the Seder in my shul. Again, it wasn't a family Seder. 2020, the year of COVID, we also had a family Seder. But we, thank God, have a beautiful daughter, Sima Gittel, and my wife was pregnant with her then. So, and COVID hit us very hard. I don't know if you know what we went through when COVID hit us, with having to refund millions of rands to guests from around the world when the rand plummeted. Do you guys remember 2 years ago? So we were not in the greatest of space when it came to that Seder, but it was a very meaningful and purposeful Seder, and we certainly did have a meaningful Seder at that time with our family, but a very different situation. So this year, please God, we will have a meaningful Seder as a family. We hired somebody for the first night. The second night will be, I will conduct the communal Seder. I don't know if I'll have what to tell them. Maybe some of you will come and remind me some of the things that we discussed. Okay, at least Rosalind's taking some notes.
You're too young to forget.
Yes, I have to go to Cynthia's class, Cynthia Lips, on Monday to remember not to forget. Do you remember the Sgula? I told you guys, if you study the Parsha of Ha'azinu by heart, it's a song. Then it says in the works of our sages that it's a Segula for a good memory. So hopefully you remember what to do. Now, of course, we got to go into our Seder and get ready for it, because we're preparing for family and friends to gather together and celebrate our tradition, our culture, and throughout our long and storied history, the Jewish commitment to celebrating Pesach has been very strong. Even in the most difficult situations, people have found ways to mark the momentous occasion of the Seder, to celebrate it. So what I did here actually is I included this story, which I already told you guys about the concentration camp. So we're going to skip it, but for those who want it, you could find it on Google. The story of Pesach in the Valingen concentration camp 1943, how they made a way to celebrate the Seder there. And of course, for everyone, whether you're celebrating it at a retreat, or with relatives, or friends, or even home alone, you have to make sure that you give it all you got. Make it as meaningful as Shmerel did. And if times call for whatever reason that you can't be with family or friends, it's not a reason to detract from the Seder observance or the exuberance that's associated with it. Just like we said many times, even if you're on a holiday, it's still Shabbos, it's still Yom Tov. You still dress for the occasion, even if there's nobody to impress. The way we dress in Shabbos, the way we celebrate our Yom Tovs, is not to impress others, but it's to celebrate the festival itself. Yeah, Moshe Pro. Now, we discussed, if you go all the way back to the very first Seder, look in the Torah, we learn that while the Jews ate the Korban Pesach while they were still in Egypt, they were quarantined at home, just like we were 2 years ago. Right? They weren't allowed to leave their home their entire Pesach evening. That very first Seder, if you recall, we did a shiur a week or two ago about the difference between the first Korban Pesach and the one that was celebrated in Jerusalem, the many years later, how they were different. The very first one was at home. Ever since then, it was only in the temple. You're not allowed to offer a sacrifice at home. Why, of course, was the first Korban Pesach done at home? Why was it relegated to the personal sphere and not into the public square? In Egypt, the nascent Jewish people, our ancestors, stood at the cusp of their peoplehood. And it's precisely when, at that time, that this disparate group of individuals were able to blend into a nation, when they were going to become the Jewish people. The time of Aries, they were going as the sheep. Aries is the astrological sign of this time of the year. What's that? Pardon?
Ram.
The ram. Isn't the Aries sheep a ram? So it's your birthday. Friday. Oh, we got more birthdays. Gregorian. And your Jewish birthday? 27 Nisan, right after Pesach. Wow. Well, happy birthday, Ronnie. It's on Friday. We have to sing happy birthday to Ronnie. So, in order for the Jewish nation to become a nation, we if you recall, I previously taught a shiur about the difference between Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. Aries and Taurus are two important parts. First, you want to become a nation. Aries, we all have to be together. But you have to know, for God to give us the Torah at Mount Sinai, everyone had to be there. But if one person was missing, God wouldn't give it to us. Every individual counts. We have to learn about the importance of individuality, about celebrating with our family. Even whether you go to a retreat or you do it at home, even if it's alone, you got to know the importance of family. Nations tend to swallow up individuals, and this is why this family-based message was so important for them before they were to leave Egypt. And if for whatever reason your Pesach experience is a more private one, then remember, don't you know you're never alone, never alone. It doesn't matter where you are. There's nothing in his eyes more special than you. Wherever you go, Hashem is with you. So if for whatever reason you are home alone, then remember you're never alone, because wherever you are, Hashem is with you. And don't forget that. But of course, that's why we need to take the time now to discuss what are we going to do to make it most meaningful, whether with others or ourselves. Whether it's the songs or the insights or the stories. Maybe there's the same story you hear year after year from your rabbi. Some of you there, I see your facial expressions. Maybe it's that same insight or idea. But if it moves you, if it inspires you, even if it's nostalgic, well, do it. Make it real. Now, beyond the tradition, the Seder is so important because it taps into a specific spiritual energy that is only present at that time. Somebody says he's so frum. You're supposed to bring Shabbos in a little early. This guy tells me he brings in Shabbos on Tuesday. Listen, you can't be that frum. There's a certain times, according to the Jewish calendar, if you study the Zemanim, there are rules. And the Seder has rules. I know if you're going to a birthday party, there might not be rules how you're going to sing happy birthday. But the Seder has rules to it. And we have to follow those rules. Okay, this guy, he tells me he's that religious, he doesn't hold by the Eruv, he doesn't even let his voice carry on Shabbos. That's how religious he is. Okay, wow. We have to know that you can't decide to do Pesach today because that energy doesn't exist today. Okay, there's a basic idea in Kabbalah that everything that happens in this world is actually only a symptom of a spiritual energy that has been unleashed in the higher spiritual realms. And this is true about everything, ranging from, did you see the spilled coffee before? Well, you know that why that coffee spilled? Because there was some reason, the fact that God wanted. I don't know what the reason was, but there was some reason, okay? And the fact that Mount Everest is how tall? Who's been up Mount Everest there? Not you. And it's certainly true about miracles. When a miracle, such as the Exodus from Egypt, occurs, it is because a special supernatural divine energy was present at that time. And if you know that energy was present at that time, then that energy is here, now, and this time as well. That's why the bracha we say when we start the Yom Tov is that God performed miracles for our ancestors by Yamim Ahem in those days, Bizman Hazeh in this time. Because we are reliving, we are reenacting. So the Exodus story, yes, it's an old story, but it was a symptom of a certain spiritual energy that was present at that pivotal night on the 15th of Nisan. How many years ago? This year will be 3,334 years ago. So we have to remember that. And there's another important point that we discuss. These energies are recurring. Each year, when this day comes, any day that was a special day, we say this about all our holidays, that very same spiritual energy that was present then is present again. And so the same energy that allowed for the Exodus back then is also present right now. Just a second, guys. I need to take this call. One second. Okay, apologies. Didn't seem to work. It was a call from Israel. Certain calls these days you gotta be available for. So we have to tap into that energy too. Just a second, ladies and gents. Mike? Sorry about that, guys. So, my friends, if you think about it that way, we make a, what would you say? We do the Seder not just to commemorate, but rather to recreate, to reenact. We're not living history, but we're tapping into the existing reality. The same idea that we said many times. Not his story, but our story. See its relevance. And this loops back to the original idea. The Exodus experience by our ancestors is not just a story that happened long ago, but actually it's a recurring narrative that is playing itself out in your life. Just as we say in the Haggadah, B'chol Dor V'Dor, in every generation. And the Alter Rebbe added B'chol Yom V'Yom, every single day. Chayav Adam Lira says Atzma, a person should see themselves Ki'iluhu Yatzam Mitzrayim, as if you yourself experienced the exodus from Egypt. The energy that was present then is present today, and it's for your taking. Take it, enjoy it, run with it. And so, hopefully we can understand that there is, with all that precision to the rituals that we do at the Seder, there's a lot of meaning and purpose. And we should understand it. Because it's a spiritual experience prescribed by God, and if we want to capture that experience, we have to follow the way that God prescribed it, as is taught by our traditions. So while you wouldn't think that a function, an event, should be going with various certain events, we sing happy birthday. How should you sing happy birthday? That's a silly question. But Seder means order. And there's an exact order to the system of how we celebrate. And you can think of so many other examples in life that are like that. I don't know, we said a bride likes her dress in a specific way. And in sports, you have the specifications. And a website or email typed in the wrong way is not going to reach its destination. The nuances and details of each mitzvah have meaning, and they accomplish something, but if you type it in wrongly, it's not going to get to where it has to. The same thing, the amount of matzah that we eat, the timing of the Seder, when it starts, when it finishes. You have to start after night, and you have to finish before midnight. This is prescribed in the Torah. Yes, exactly, because the Korban Pesach had to be concluded before Chatzot, the Torah says. The second night, people aren't as careful about because the second night itself is a custom. It's only in diaspora. For those who are lucky to go to Israel for Pesach, only one Seder. Right? So that's why the second night we're not as specific and precise about it. Right, but the Korban Pesach, the middle of the day was the 15th. They ate their Korban Pesach the previous night when God passed over the Jewish homes. And it was that night that they had to eat exactly. And ever since then, the Korban Pesach was not on the day of the Exodus, but the day before the Exodus. Okay, just so you understand, when we're doing the Jews left Egypt at midday on the 15th of Nisan. But the Seder we do on the eve of the 15th. Jewish holidays always start the night before, right? Secular holidays are always daytime. The only exception, I joke, is Kratzmach, right? Kratzmach they do the night before because he was Jewish. Okay, he's no longer, he messed up, sorry. But because he was Jewish, I think that's why they do Kratzmach the night before. Anyways, we don't need him at our Seder, so we're not going to talk about the Last Supper now. Wasn't it also Pesach? Easter, right? That's why Easter always falls on Pesach time. By 12 o'clock, because that's what the Torah says. God said so that it had to be concluded by Chatzot Halayla. Anything that was left over couldn't be consumed after midnight. God says so, that's the reason. Because we're reenacting the original Seder that the Jews did before they left Egypt. But in actual fact, halachically speaking, now, I'm a little bit of a breaker of the own laws, but I do it because I have guests, and it's not a violation of Torah. But in my family tradition, and I believe it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, I'll have to double check the laws, that we don't eat anything after Afikoman. Nothing, not even a sip of water. All we have is 2 more cups of wine. So make sure that you quench your thirst, the dryness after that. But at our retreat, I actually do put out midnight snacks. And I imagine that the frummer crowd will not touch it because we're not supposed to. But those who aren't as religious and perhaps will need something, especially for the kids, we don't do that to the kids, then they might help themselves to some snacks. So we always put out some nice fruit platters and some things for people to have late at night if they really need. Because after all, it's a high-end program that we offer. Yes. Well, no, you never have to finish at 10 o'clock. True, there was curfew in Egypt then also, you know that. God said, don't leave your home this night. The Malach HaMavas, the angel of death, was going to execute every firstborn Egyptian. And therefore the Jewish people had to perform the rituals related that the Torah described, that we discussed at last year, putting the blood on the doorposts, etc., and having a braai that night, and not to leave their homes. So they had a curfew, just as we had 2 years ago in Pesach. But midnight is the cutoff time, not 10 p.m. that was curfew time, midnight. Midnight, by the way, is not 12 a.m. If anyone has the Pesach booklets that I gave out, that we made for you, what does it say? Just look over there on the back page. You might need glasses, a little small. Chatzot halayla. What's Chatzot halayla? What time? Look at the 15th of Friday evening, the 15th. Do you see it there? 11:13 p.m. No, that's a.m. That's the end of B'dikat Chametz. Did we not put midnight in there? At the very end, it should be. Maybe it's not there. Okay, it's sometime after 12. I can't tell you the exact time offhand. If you want, I could Google it right now. What time is Chatzot today? Chatzot means midnight.
Because it says that Moses told Pharaoh about it, but it was not specific about time.
Right.
They won't say if it didn't happen exactly at that time, then it was like a false or something.
Well, today Chatzot Hayom is 12:10, which means that Chatzot at night would also be 12:10. Chatzot happens twice a day. It's midday and midnight. So today Chatzot is 12:10. So on Pesach, I assume it's not going to be much later. It doesn't move too far from that. You just have to go to the UOS website to see the exact times. Okay, for Chatzot. Wednesday, April 6th, Chatzot is, like I said, midnight at 12:10. If you want, I could move it over to next week and check for you exact time for Chatzot on the 15th of Nisan. And it will be at 12:07. It does move by 3 minutes. And midnight is 12:08. So it actually moves by 1 minute from midday to midnight. That's very interesting. Okay, I'm no astrologer, what would you call it? I don't know how it works. I can't tell you why midnight is a minute after midday. Okay, but it is that way. Oh, and Winston right away sent us the times in a link. Thank you, Winston. So there we go. So the times are on Pesach night in Johannesburg, 12:08. You have to finish Afikoman. It doesn't mean you have to finish your Seder. You have to finish Afikoman by 12:08 a.m. That gives you ample time. And then after that, you could sing around Chad Gad, Ya Chad Gad. Chad Gad. Chad Gad, Ya. What other favorite Pesach songs do you like to sing? Die, Einu, die, Einu, die, Einu, die, Einu. Ilu, Otzianu, Mimitzrayim, Mimitzrayim, die, Einu. Die, Einu. Okay, we didn't even start the Seder yet. That's why this shir will take place tomorrow. I'm still introducing it. Can you believe it? Maybe one day I'll learn accountability for time. I thought you came here. You know what? When we post this video on YouTube, this will just be introduction to the introduction, with 6 stories that get digressed into 16 other stories. All right. What was I telling you? We were talking about the Seder. We talked about how you have to do it in a precise way. Just like now, the only caveat I'll say to that is, Shmerel, the shikr, he didn't do his Seder the right way, right? To God, God knows us. And God knows if we put our heart and soul into it. And therefore, we just have to do our best. Of course, we have to learn the rules to try to do it with precision and meaning and purpose and know how to do it, which is what we're going to discuss tomorrow, please God, if we take off. But we say everything should be done in its right way. If you think of the human smile, right? One way of describing it is this upward pulling of our facial muscles. Okay, that's it. But everyone understands that this only captures the external expression of a smile. The movements of the muscles are a reflection of the emotional feelings inside. And similarly, the actions of the mitzvahs are all reflections of something deep and profound. The details of the action might not seem significant. Does it matter how much matzah I eat? Does it matter how much potato or onion I stick in the salt water? How much wine I drink? Yes, it does. From an inner perspective, because that's what it represents, it makes a huge difference. And that's what we have to understand. Because it's not to take away the heart and the passion and the feeling. At the end of the day, that's all important, that you have the meaning and the purpose. Sorry, guys, I don't know who's nudging. God very much wants our hearts and wishes for us to have a relationship with Him. Right? When Hashem notices a sincere effort to accomplish this, God takes notice. God derives immense pleasure and reciprocates. Even if we didn't manage to have a Seder like Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, but nevertheless we realize that Shmerel's Seder was even better. So there's two elements. There's the meaning, the purpose, the passion, but there's also the details of how it should be done. Reminds me of a story which I think I'll have to conclude today's shiur with. It's an old parable I heard as a kid, but I guess worthwhile to share it today, and with that we'll conclude. There was once a very wealthy fellow, and he had a very interesting custom. This guy, he was so generous, philanthropic, benevolent, kind, loving, caring, generous. His home was always open, and he would invite all the poor people of his village to eat with him. What would he do? He had this crystal bell. He would ring the bell, and guess what would happen? As soon as he rang his bell, a whole army of servants would appear with most gastronomic delights, food and drinks, a whole variety of the finest meal you could imagine. Well, at the end of every meal, what would he do? When he was ready, ding-a-ling, ring the bell, and the waiters would all come and collect and clean up. It's magic, okay? This is many, many years ago.
It's a Jewish Harry Potter.
Jewish Harry Potter. There's more to Harry Potter. We'll talk tomorrow. When it comes to the 4 kids, we have to talk about which kid is which school. These are my kids that came up with this pshat about which of Harry Potter, which of the Harry Potter schools. I know nothing about Harry Potter. I never even saw the movie, never read the book. But my kids, they're mavens in this. They know it all. The wizards. Anyways, he had a very beautiful custom. At the end of the meal, he would say to all of his guests, poor people, I want you to take one item every one of you is entitled to take home, whether it's a piece of silverware or a glass or a utensil. One thing you could take with you and either take it as a souvenir for yourself or you could sell it and make something. It was his kind act that he liked to do. Now one day a poor person from a neighboring village received an invitation to this wealthy man's house. And he was so delighted, so elated that he could eat dinner in this mansion, this palatial home. But when it came time for him to take something home, at the end of the meal, the man would ring the bell and say everybody could take one thing with them. Most people take something silver, piece of art. What could you chop that is worth selling? This man thought to himself, what am I going to do with a goblet, a silver spoon? He said, I want that crystal bell. Now the wealthy man, in fact, it's a little bit of a strange request. It's not a very useful item for a poor person who doesn't have his own servants. What are you going to do with this crystal bell? But if that's what you ask for, gesundheit, you take the crystal bell, you can have it. Poor man comes back to his village, and the next day he invites all of his neighbors. He says, come to a big feast in my house. Come. He set out 2 wooden tables. He sat down to wait for his guests with great anticipation. Everybody arrives. Everybody's sitting. They're all curious to know, how's this poor guy going to feed all these people? And when the last person arrived, Mitdamo, the poor man takes out from under his table the crystal bell, and he starts ringing the bell. Whole ceremony, pump and ceremony, ringing the bell. Everyone's waiting. Garnished. Nothing happens, nada. He rings harder, banging, boom, boom, boom. Nothing. Still nothing's happening. He rang it fervorously. He's louder and more intensely with greater, and nothing. No servants appeared. No platters of food arrived. Nothing. The poor man was humiliated. You can imagine. Red with indignation. And he left his bewildered guests with nothing to eat. He was so angry, he ran back to the other village, to the rich man's house. He says, "You are a trickster, a swindler. You deceived me. You switched the bells on me. You didn't give me the right bell." The man says, "What are you talking about? I gave you the same bell that I used." "No way." He said, "I gave you the bell I used yesterday, I promised." Poor man was livid. He says, "Then why did nobody appear with all that food when I rang the bell, and they came when you rang the bell?" Oh, ladies and gentlemen, please God, tomorrow we will talk. At the Seder, we are tapping into a special spiritual energy that is present specifically on the 15th of Nisan. The specifics of the matzahs and the wine and the maror and the Haggadah, those are all the bells that we use to elicit those divine energies on this day. And if we try to tinker with the time, if we change the settings, if we don't do it exactly the way we're supposed to, then we are ringing hollow bells that evoke nothing. So come back tomorrow. Please God, we will discuss the precision of the details of the Seder. The only way to tap into the spiritual energy is by following the traditions, the customs, the ideas, and the specifics of them. And please God, this will help us all have a meaningful, a wonderful, a fantastic, a fabulous celebratory Seder. If you want to get through anything, then just remind me when I'm telling my silly jokes and stories to shush. Unless you enjoy them as well, then I could keep doing that too. Zaykas and everyone, thanks for joining us. Please God, tomorrow, right here.